Bear with me as I figure out the mic for the first time. It's the first time I've ever worn the wireless mic here on Fun with Microphone Night. This is the first time I've ever taught a Wednesday night lesson. So if everything goes well, I invite the elders to invite me to give a sermon as I work on my doing everything in a worship service bucket list. If things don't go well, I'll be looking forward to going home after after this is over. But if you do invite me to give a sermon, just make sure you give me a little bit of notice. I think 1, maybe 2 years will be enough on that. So I've been given some advice on what to do, and it's your first time to give a lesson to the adult class, and that is to ask a bunch of open-ended questions and let y'all talk about it for about 30 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. Now, if you do ask me some tough questions and they are not in my notes somewhere, I'm probably just going to turn it around and ask the audience about that. So I am going to ramble over some things for, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so, and then I will open it up for questions, but I do want to get at least a couple pages of my notes before I open it up here. And hopefully, when you do respond, hopefully you'll have some nice things out of the Bible to go with on that. That's what I really hope. And we're going to be talking about something that those of us who have been Christians for a long time, we all think about the same on it. We all probably have about the same thoughts. So I'm going to ask some questions that I've never heard asked before about this topic. And I'm also going to give a disclaimer here at the front that if I say anything that causes you to re-examine your life and it makes you uncomfortable, I didn't mean to do that. Or at least I think I should apologize for it, because if you end up re-examining your life and finding maybe there is something that I'm not sure about, maybe if it has caused you to think about it, maybe that is a good thing. But do you know what today is, by chance? It's Ian's 9th birthday. That's right. So, I'm sorry that I didn't bring any cake for you tonight. But for those of you who haven't known us for 9 years, today is Ian's 9th birthday. 9 years ago, if you've never heard the story, when my wife gave childbirth for Ian, both of us slept through it. I was asleep at home, not knowing what was going on, and she was full of medicine because it was an up and down experience that was just a difficult situation. She was in the hospital for 2 months, Ian was in the hospital for 3 months. So it was a roller coaster of emotions. Tonight's lesson isn't really about that, but it has more to do with his age. And the last time I mentioned Ian in passing in an invitation, once we got in the car, he told me, "Never talk about me again." And so while these notes were in my Bible, he saw his name right here, and he said, "Please don't talk about me tonight." Sorry, buddy. Have to talk about what I know about, and so that's it. So since the things that Jason Mathis says is memorable, the inspiration for this lesson actually came from one of his memorable Wednesday night lessons. And if you're asking which one, because he has given several, the one that I'm thinking about here was he played a video of a lady who grew up in the church, and then when she was older, she ended up leaving the church. And this was a video that she had posted about why she came to that conclusion. And there was one thing in that video that really stuck out to me that was, I don't remember anyone else bringing this up when we talked about it later that day, and then there was so much discussion that it spilled over into another week. And when this was mentioned, it just kind of, it really stuck with me. And that was, she said she was baptized at the age of 8. And I was thinking to myself, Ian is 8, today's 9, but when I watched this video, he was 8, and I was thinking to myself, I can't imagine Ian getting baptized. I mean, he's a sweet kid, but I don't think he's becoming a Christian material at the age of 8. And I know that kids are different. Some are ready at a younger age than others, and some are a little bit older when that happens. But, that doesn't make me a bad parent because Ian isn't ready at the age of 8. I know that can't be right. But she went on to mention that since she was 8, she was the child of a preacher. And I can imagine that if you're a preacher, there is probably some extra pressure on you because everyone's watching your kids and they're probably watching when are they going to become a Christian. And, personally, I can't relate to that. I will say that this past summer when Marilyn and I went on vacation, we went to visit her cousin. And her cousin has a son who's 13. And as a 13-year-old, he's delivering gospel sermons today. So he was ready earlier than a lot of people. I don't think he was baptized at 8, but it's, I can say that, at 8, Ian has the tender heart of a child. But I'm thinking that if you're an 8-year-old, as a parent, I can probably sit there and make him memorize the plan of salvation. But does he understand what that means? I can teach him all the required knowledge, and he can have a rote memorization of everything that I tell him. Does he fully understand it? I think in this particular video that we watched, that lady had her parents' faith forced onto her, and it wasn't really her faith. So, of course, as a parent, my primary goal in life, I believe, is that I need to raise my child so that he becomes a Christian. And I'm sure I fail at this sometimes. I know I fail at this sometimes, but that should be the goal that all of us should have, that our children grow up to be Christians. And I'm pretty sure that there is not an age limit when we don't care about that anymore. That's going to be, as long as I'm living, that's going to be my goal for Ian. And so I've kind of thought about it. I've seen other people kind of give this example before. So a timeline of their life. Here's where they're born. The moment they're born, they can't make any decisions on whether or not to be a Christian, so we know they're saved. You go along, they're age 2, they're still okay, and they're 4, they're still okay, and they keep progressing through life, and at some point, they're no longer too young anymore. All of a sudden, there's like a moment that happens where all of a sudden, they need to be saved. And if they're not saved, then we have a problem. The Bible doesn't give a lot of clear information on exactly when that is, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. But a lot of times we focus on, I don't want my child to go too far this way in life without being baptized. So the moment that they reach that age, I want them to be baptized right that moment. But one thing I want to think about right now is, can we go too far this way and expect them to be baptized a little bit too early in life? Because I think it happened in that video with the lady who was baptized at age 8. That seems like that could be a contributing factor, or maybe just another symptom of why she ended up leaving the church. And so one of the things that, one thing that we see in America is you're not allowed to sign a contract until you're 18. Now, I don't want to look towards earthly laws as a basis of our biblical decisions, but a lot of people recognize that children can't make all the decisions that they need to make, especially ones that will have a lifelong decision, when they are too young. Now, of course, we ask them, do you know that Jesus is the Son of God? And, I think most of our children would recognize that at a young age. But one other thing I want to think about with that is, when I read through the Old Testament, my personal Bible study right now has me in the Old Testament, and we see a lot of graphic violence in the Old Testament. And just because I want to give a specific example, one of my personal favorite is in Judges 3. It's the story of Ehud, who killed King Eglon of Moab with a sword. King Eglon was so fat that the sword was swallowed up by his fat, and he couldn't get it out. And so I've never told this story to Ian. As a boy, I think he would enjoy that. I think he would find that funny. Y'all's daughters may not find that as fun, a lot of the violence that we have in the Old Testament. But one thing I guess we want to worry about is, kind of the thought of once you see something, you can't unsee it. So in this case, once you think about a concept, you can't undo it. But that's just not reserved for children. When I read in the Old Testament the stories of where God commanded the Israelites to go in and kill off all the men, all the women, all the children so that their false religion doesn't spread anymore, killing off the little ones, as an adult, I have a hard time with that. And so that means that I can't really use that as a basis because there are some hard concepts in the Bible. But it's not just the violence that we would have trouble with our kids seeing. And just for delicate sensibilities, I'm going to call this the Song of Solomon content that we see in the Old Testament. And while the book of Song of Solomon is wholesome, there's a lot of other stories that are not so wholesome. A preacher friend of mine once asked on Facebook, is there a story in the Bible that you've never heard in a sermon? Because I want you to challenge me so I can figure out how I can use it in a sermon. I said, okay, let's use the story in Genesis chapter 38. And so y'all probably don't have that memorized off the top of your head. It has a lot of things that I wouldn't mention right off, but just the one sentence answer to that is it's Judah, the son of Israel, mistook his daughter-in-law Tamar as a prostitute, and I'll just leave it at that. So, I've been given advice as a parent that I am not supposed to let my child know about what I'm going to call Song of Solomon situations at his age. And so, of course, we want our children to learn about these situations from the Bible and from Christians and not from the world. But you would expect that a Christian should be able to read the entire Bible. So I don't know what the appropriate age is for reading some of these things that are in the Old Testament. Do you want a child to read the entire Bible with all of these things in it, even at the age of 10? So I'm going to pause right here and ask if anyone wants to comment on any of that.
I know with Cohen, he was in there asking his mom questions, and she comes out to the garage to me. She said, "Hey, Cohen's asking questions. This is your time to talk to him." And so he came out, and he wanted to know where babies come from, and I explained it, and he sat there and he listened, and then he goes, "It all makes sense now." But I remember teaching a high school class, and it was going to get a little bit, and I had gone to the parents and said, "Hey, is this okay?" And they said, "Whatever's in the Bible is fine." So I think that in an appropriate setting and at the age when the kid starts hearing it at school and starts hearing it from other children wherever, it's time for us parents to step up and tell them before somebody else tells them about the Song of Solomon situations.
So last year we had to sub in for the 5th and 6th grade, and in that curriculum for our kids, it was talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and it was talking about a lot of premarital sexual things for that age group that was approved to be able to be taught, and we were kind of thrown off having to sub for that. We were like, whoa, what about this? I mean, I'm all fine for it, but it's like that was something that we were unaware of, but there was a lot of things in there that we just were like, all right, now here we go. If we're going to jump in, Cannonball it is, so.
Yeah, it does seem that like, from what I can tell, today's children are learning about these things earlier than I was. So that's true. So what age? So you said your class was 5th and 6th grade. What age was?
I'm thinking it was 2 years ago, and he's 12 now, so 10.
All right, so with the question I had earlier, can we baptize our kids too early? Am I just looking in the wrong place, or is that a valid concern?
think it'd be a mistake to not allow a kid to be baptized if they're at a certain age, because you may not get that opportunity again. My youngest boy wanted to be baptized at a young age, and I want to say he was 4th or 5th grade. I honestly don't remember. He would have been about 10. He'd have been about 10. And I made him write a letter to himself. And in that letter, tell exactly why he wanted to be baptized. Date it and everything. And I've got the letter. I've got it, and I know right where to pull it out of the drawer if he ever doubts why he was baptized. And so it's in his own handwriting and the thoughts that he was having at 9, 10 years old when he decided to be baptized.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that does remind me of a couple things I was wanting to say. If it's true, if they come to you with an open heart, wanting to learn more about what it means to be a Christian, you shouldn't discourage that, I wouldn't think. And because you never know when that opportunity will come around again. If they are not baptized by the time they're 18 and they go off to college, they're going to be even less likely to hear it from you. So you need to take advantage of that. And I also like what you said about having them write a letter to their future self, because I've read where other people have recommended that they do that. And so that is something I was going to bring up a little bit later. So thanks for that.
So what about parents knowing the age of accountability? Do they know what's right from wrong at 8 years old? Do they know right from wrong when they're 5 years old? You know, it always, growing up, my brother and I, you know, we started in the church. We were walking in the church, you know, we were born in the church, I guess you could say that. But how would we know where the age of accountability starts as parents? Because you could say that 10-year-olds, you're good for 10. But other parents could say, just like you said before, that young man or your wife's cousin has a son that's already preaching the gospel at a certain age, you know. Where does the age of accountability start?
Well, I never say anything, but I was just thinking about when Michael and Allie were thinking about those things. And for Michael, he was 10 or 11. And he fully, you know, I know, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing this. And he was baptized. But then when he was, 18, 19, he goes, did I really know what I was doing? I'm not sure I knew what I was doing. So he was baptized again so he could know, I know for certain that what I'm doing is because this is what the Bible tells me to do, and this is what I want and need to do. So if they do that at an early age, there's nothing that says when they get older they can't look at themselves and say, did I really know what I was doing?
And that's part of growth as part of your Christian walk. You're certainly going to know more the longer you're a Christian. So yeah, that is one thing that we all know more than we knew when we were baptized, at least we're supposed to. And so, yeah, that's one thing that we do wonder about. Don?
But don't we lose part of the effect of what they're taking on? This is for the rest of their life. You know, they can say, yeah, I'm going to be baptized for the remission of sin and that. But are they really realizing what it will affect and what they will have to do to be a Christian?
It's a lifelong commitment. And when you're 10 or 12, your life hadn't been very long yet. So I think it was Jenny over here that had a hand up.
What I was going to say, actually, Renee kind of covered, but it talks about what Ed was saying. The blessing is that, you know, if, like we've discussed, at any point you question it, you can be re-immersed. If it didn't matter, if you truly knew what you were doing the first time, you're good. You just got wet the second time. But if you didn't, the consequences that could happen if you weren't immersed again. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be baptized twice, but, you know, we do have that available to us.
Then to go on with that, when I was growing up, I always heard the age 12. 12, 12, 12. And I wondered why, and I finally started asking, why is 12 kind of considered the age to be baptized? And my dad said, well, because Jesus was baptized, or was not baptized, was in the temple at 12 teaching, and so people kind of put, well, then that maybe might be the right age. But as a teacher, let me tell you something about children. One 12-year-old may very well comprehend and grasp what they're doing, and another one might not have a clue. That's why it's imperative as parents that you're constantly communicating with them, answering questions, preparing them so that when those concepts of, you know, I want to be baptized come along, they are prepared. And as what you were saying, do they really comprehend it? Does anybody, when they first become a Christian, did the eunuch truly comprehend all that it would entail to become a Christian just after talking that time with Philip? No. But he did know what was necessary, and he knew why it was necessary. So of any age, the older you get, the more you comprehend the commitment you made. But it's the same with my marriage. The older I get, the more I comprehend the commitment I made, 32 years ago. So that's what makes it so difficult. One child may be ready at 12. Another child may not be ready till they're 15 or 16. And it's all in, you have to communicate with them as much as possible when it comes to church, the Bible, and being ready to answer those questions. And I'll go in and tell you, it's terrifying.
He's coming.
And I'm going to agree with Greg. Like, we have Jackson, who is 9, and Allie, who is 13. We've been here our entire lives. They know. Jackson, I will see being baptized before Allie. She knows more, and she's in the place now where she doesn't feel worthy enough. And so we are trying our best. So just, Jackson's heart's ready. He would be baptized tomorrow, I guarantee it. And she's just not ready yet. She doesn't feel that she deserves that. And so the heart and the maturity of the child, I think, has a lot to do with it, their heart, and knowing they both understand what it means. One's ready, one's not.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ashley on that. I'd always viewed baptism as something akin to marriage, just like Greg had kind of the comparison with marriage. Well, is any 12-year-old ready for marriage? I mean, maybe back in the day there were prepared marriages or something like that, and relationships. Today we call that pedophilia. So, but for someone that age that hasn't gone through the meat grinder that is middle school or high school, who hasn't gone through the raging hormones or anything like that, if they're baptized and then fall away, is there not some passage, and I couldn't find it, that talks about, they took on Christianity and then walked away. Their state is even worse than those who were never baptized at all. I don't know how God would look at that. Maybe they didn't know what they were doing, but they still did it anyway.
Yeah, I've got 2 letters in my safe. I'm waiting for a third one. But with Kaya, she wasn't ready till she was 16. And I know Lisa was getting impatient, and I knew she'd get around to it, or I prayed that she would get around to it soon. And then Cohen was more quick to be baptized. And I think men or boys, as they I don't know if they mature faster, or if it's, I guess mature is a bad word, but maybe get impatient and want to be like their dad, or like the other men in the church, and be ready. But I think it's very important, and I'm guilty of not doing this. I started out really good. I said, if you're going to be baptized, you sit there during church, you open up your Bible and you read through, that there'll be no more playing with toys, whatever, which he was a little beyond that age. But, like leading prayers at home, doing stuff when they ask you at the church to do. He knows that even though I may not sometime want to, I've made a rule that if somebody asks me to do something, I'm going to do it, whether or not I feel, comfortable or uncomfortable or whatever. If I'm asked to do it, I'll do it. I told him the same thing. You're going to have to step up. And if you're going to be baptized, those childish ways in church have to go away. And I think that might have kept Kaya a couple years from doing it because she didn't want to grow up that quick. She didn't want to, open up her Bible and feel like, that she had to partake. But Cohen was ready. So, yeah, I agree that it's up to the child.
Go ahead. Do we have any other comments before I move on to the next point? Okay, so in preparing this lesson, one of the things I did was Google, does the Bible give an age range that you should become a Christian? Should you be baptized? And anytime I do a Google search on a Bible topic like this, I also put Church of Christ in quotes, just so hopefully it brings me to something that someone in the Church of Christ has written. That doesn't automatically make it right, and if I don't add that, that doesn't make the answer automatically wrong. But I did want to get several different opinions on, does the Bible give any ages that we should look at? So the easiest way to answer this is I have a question for you. What is the age of the youngest baptism recorded in the Bible? And since no one is raising their hand, it was a trick question. I couldn't find the ages of anyone in the Bible who was baptized, not including Jesus, who was referenced a moment ago, where he was demonstrating a knowledge and understanding at the age of 12, but his baptism, of course, wasn't until the beginning of his ministry. So you could look at that a couple of different ways. So, of course, we have examples like in Acts 16:15, we have the story of Lydia, who was baptized with her household, but that doesn't tell us who in her household was baptized. That could be brothers and her grandparents, and not necessarily children. And again, we have the Philippian jailer in Acts 16:33, where it says he was baptized at once, he and all his family. And I don't think the scriptures actually said who his family was in that. So we don't get any ages given. I do want to pause for a moment and point out that, as Rick mentioned a moment ago, we all use the term age of accountability. That's the term that I've been hearing since I was about 10 to 13. Those words themselves don't actually appear in the Bible, but we always use them just because it's the easiest way to explain this concept of the moment when you need to be baptized. And of course, we think about it, if sin is what separates us from God, then the moment that you sin is the moment that we need Jesus as a sacrifice to take the place of our sins. And so some people referenced the way that the modern Jews, their coming of age is today the Bar Mitzvah, the Bat Mitzvah. For boys, it's 13. For girls, it's 12, because apparently they do mature quicker than the boys after all. However, I couldn't find any reference to that in the Old Testament. If you know of one, let me know. Apparently the references to that come in other Jewish writings outside of the Bible, and apparently it's a big moneymaker for them, a lot better than the Sweet 16 party is for our daughters. So let me know if you know of any specific verse saying that the Israelites were supposed to become adults at 13, and the Jews don't even treat their children as adults at 13. They just, for them, it's more of a ceremony than actual taking on of responsibilities.
The age I can think of in the Old Testament would be the age of 20, where it talks about men being of the age to go to battle.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was surprised at the number of people who reference the age of 20. I'm not saying this is right, I'm not saying they're right, but it's something that we can think about, and that's not the only thing. Since he mentioned it in my notes, it's Numbers chapter 1 that says the age of military service starts at the age of 20. But can anyone think of any other references to the age of 20 in the Old Testament? Just throwing that out there. I have some in my notes in case you don't. That's the first one that I see reference. So he was saying that in the end of Numbers, beginning of Deuteronomy, all of the people over the age of 20 who believed the spies that said that we're not going to be able to take the land because they're big and powerful and we're not. God said that if they are over the 20 or over, they're not going to see the promised land. It's the people 20 and under, they were the ones who are going to grow up, wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and then take the promised land. So that's another example of the age of 20. There's another one in Exodus chapter 13, starting with verse 11, and I'm going to actually read this one. My Bible calls this section the census tax. The Lord said to Moses, "When you take the census of the people of Israel, then each shall give a ransom for his life to the Lord when you number them, that there be no plague among them when you number them. Each who is numbered in the census shall give this, half a shekel, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. The shekel is 20 gerahs, half a shekel as an offering to the Lord. Everyone who is numbered in the census, from 20 years old and upwards, shall give the Lord's offering. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less. Then the half shekel, when you give the Lord's offering to make atonement for your lives, you shall take the atonement money from the people of Israel and give it for the service of the tent of meeting, that it may bring the people of Israel to remembrance before the Lord, so as to make atonement for your lives." So there's several different examples here. One more, Leviticus 27 has the laws of valuation, which said people over the age of 20 had a premium paid for if they were traded as slaves, but if you were under the age of 20, it was essentially half the value given to that. I was surprised to see several people, I didn't see anyone say they agreed with it, but I saw several people that said there's an argument to be made that you can be as late as 20 for that. One other example that I remember hearing when I was a child, when I was about to hit the age of accountability, someone told me as kind of a floor, they mentioned Josiah, the boy king, and because of how in Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 34 in verses 1 and 2, it says that he became king at the age of 8, and essentially that he followed the laws of the Lord. And if you kind of leave it like that, you might think, okay, maybe age 8 is a very low floor for that. But if you're going to use that as an example, then you need to continue with verse 3, which, let's see, for the 8th year of his reign, meaning he was age 16, while he was still a youth, he began to seek the God of his father David. So at the age of 16, he started asking about God. So he apparently wasn't even doing that before the age of 16. Continuing in the verse, and in the 12th year, meaning he was the age of 20, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Ashram, the carved images, and the molten images. So he started learning about God at age 16. He started actually acting upon these and doing God's will at the age of 20. So perhaps, Robbie, you didn't have to wait for Kaya until last week. I'm not saying that 16 was wrong, but there's maybe you didn't need to worry about as much, but there you go. So do we have any more comments about this? Okay.
So would we argue that God was wise in not specifying any age? Think if the age had been specified, for example, as 14, then wouldn't baptism run the risk of losing any meaning whatsoever? It's just something to be done at this age and no other. No, they're approaching 14, they'll be 14 next week. Okay, let's get the baptism ready, and versus it being, left to the person, perhaps left to the parents. Has that child reached a maturity level like Ashley was saying earlier, and it'll be different with each one.
All right, any other thoughts? Okay.
The only age I can think of in the Old Testament that was a requirement of God was circumcision. And that was just for the boys, by the way. But 8 days old. And of course, we know from a medical standpoint why that is. It's for the clotting of the blood, so the child wouldn't bleed to death. Because as science has shown us, the vitamin K is the highest level at 8 days old. And so the clotting would take place. But that is the only age I can think of that is specified at this age you will do this.
And of course, with that example, it just goes to show how much science it really confirms what the Bible says. So, Bert, did I see your hand?
Well, one thing I think Mr. Allen would probably mention if he was here tonight, and I know they're out visiting, but he has a book that was extremely helpful for my children, and I think there's probably been some other children within the congregation has utilized as parents have with their children. So if you have young children and you're contemplating the baptism thing, get with Mr. Allen. He has a book that they get to read it and kind of answer questions in it, and it's on baptism. And it's a great way to kind of get their mind stimulated and ask them questions and help them answer them to see if they really are ready. I don't know the name of the book, but he's got it. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to mention that I remember you and Chazrin talking about that. I think it was with Jarek, and I remember that coming up even back then. It looks like we've just got a couple minutes left, and so that makes a very good stopping point, about halfway through my notes. So I will pick this up at another time. Unless anyone else has a comment, I think we are ready for a closing prayer. Oh, one other thing I want to mention. If you've seen these little cards in the lobby and you don't know what they are, I make those for our visitation team as just little throw-ins to the letter to, I guess, enhance them a little bit, or something I do for fun. I just take one of my pictures, add a couple of Bible verses to them. I just wanted to mention that. I did that about 10 years ago, and I'm doing it again now that Marilyn and I run a visitation team again. So just want to say y'all are free to pick those up. So who's got the closing prayer?
Wait, can I just? I want to ask a question. How old was Christ when he was a child and he was teaching in the temple?
12.
12. Okay. Do you think that could be an example of that was put in there because of that?
A lot of people seem to think that. I forgot the exact wording of it, but it showed that. Especially when let me find the verse that I had.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to slow you down. I just thought.
But I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't early. There are a couple of times in that chapter of Luke 2 where it said, and the child continued to grow and become strong, increasing in wisdom, in verse 40, and Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature in verse 52. So kind of implies that he wasn't just born with displaying all the knowledge of God as a baby. That he had to grow up and learn it, and it was age 12 was pretty much the only story we have of him as a child, and that's where it was certainly demonstrating that at least the Son of God, who is also a man, could at least demonstrate that he had what it took to be wise enough at that age.